Do you know what's more popular than beaches? That's right, it's bunkers. Okay, maybe it's not quite as popular, but if you're ever near here, you will notice that there are bunkers everywhere. In fact, you can see them in every park, every playground, every street, even inside some buildings. So, why is Switzerland so obsessed with these concrete boxes? Well, it all has to do with their neighbors. In the 19th century, Switzerland was having a pretty good time. They had just made their delicious chocolate even more delicious by adding alcohol to it. And they were about to open their first casino. But then France decided to have a little nap and invaded Belgium. Then they went, "Ooh, we're bored now," and started looking for new places to fight. And unfortunately for Switzerland, they were next on the menu. But luckily, they were prepared because Swiss citizens had been secretly building bomb shelters since the 1860s. So when the French got there, they found an entire country of bunkers. And this is how Switzerland became the country built on secret bunkers. Switzerland is full of secret bunkers. But before we get to the biggest and best ones, let me tell you about a small village in northern Italy called Sana, because this town is also full of bunkers. But unlike the Swiss, the Italians didn't build these bunkers out of choice. You see, in 1935, Mussolini came up with the idea of building a really big wall around his country to keep the bad guys in and the good guys out. But the thing is, he didn't know where the bad guys were. So instead of building a straight wall, he built a curvy wall, and that wall happened to go right through Sana. So the townspeople literally woke up one day to find themselves on the front lines of World War II. And to make things worse, they weren't prepared. Unlike the Swiss, they didn't have any bunkers. So instead of staying in their town, they had to flee into the mountains so the Germans could use their homes as bathrooms. But eventually, they all came back when the war ended. And today, you can actually explore these bunkers for yourself. So if you're in the area and you need to take a no to you know where to go. But let's get back to Switzerland. Now, back in the early 1900s, the Swiss people were feeling pretty confident about their ability to stay neutral during a war. In fact, they even had a saying, "We are too small to be attacked and too unimportant to be invaded." But then World War I happened and they realized that their saying wasn't true at all. And to prove it, here's a map showing exactly how wrong they were. But the Swiss knew that they couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So after the war, they started making plans to defend themselves. And the cornerstone of that plan was Operation Fortress, which involved building 100,000 bunkers in case of another war. Luckily for everyone involved, World War II never made it to Switzerland. But when the Cold War did, the Swiss continued with their bunker project. And over the next few decades, they built over 170,000 of these bad boys. And if you want to see one for yourself, all you have to do is look outside. Switzerland's most iconic bunker is probably the Wehrwall, which stands for Volksschutz, which stands for Protection of the People. And they are everywhere. In fact, there's one in almost every public building, including schools, train stations, malls, museums, movie theaters, and even McDonald's. And thankfully, unlike the Italian bunkers, they're designed to be used by civilians. Each one has enough supplies to feed everyone inside for 2 weeks and enough beds for everyone to sleep in. They also have things like air filters, gas masks, and airtight metal doors. And while the Verwalls might not seem like much compared to some of the other bunkers on this list, remember that they're designed to withstand a nuclear bomb. If one goes off nearby, the Verwall will protect everyone inside from the blast and the fallout for as long as necessary. And that's pretty impressive considering that some of these are built inside McDonald's. Now, if you think those bunkers are crazy, just wait until I show you this one. For most of modern history, Switzerland has had 4 sworn enemies: France, Germany, Italy, and that one guy who took my parking spot. But their biggest threat by far has always been the Soviet Union. In fact, at one point, the Swiss government believed that up to 50,000 Soviets could attack them, along with 25,000 tanks. So they had to come up with a plan to stop them. And that plan involved the Alpine, a series of fortifications built in the Swiss Alps that connected to a network of tunnels and bunkers below the surface. Building all of this was a massive undertaking that involved carving tunnels by hand, building bridges, gun emplacements, anti-tank obstacles, and supply depots. And at its peak, there were 30,000 soldiers working on it. But it was all worth it because the Alpina was basically impenetrable. So if the Soviets had tried to invade, they would have lost thousands of men in the process. But if you thought the Alpina was impressive, just wait until I tell you about something called the New Dimension. You see, while the Alpina focused on keeping the bad guys out, the Verwalls focused on keeping everyone safe once they were in. But what if the bombs fell while you were outside? Well, that's where this comes in. The New Dimension, also known as the National Emergency Management Concept, is a set of guidelines that the Swiss government follows in case of an emergency. These guidelines cover everything from evacuations to food rations to civil defense. But probably the most interesting one is their plan for nuclear fallout. You see, if there was a nuclear disaster in Switzerland, their top priority would be to evacuate their entire population, which sounds easy. But then you realize that Switzerland is full of mountains, rivers, and lakes, which means that the only way to get around is either through France, Germany, or Italy, all of which may or may not be in ruins. So instead, the Swiss would send everyone south to the Alps and then north to the Jura Mountains. And there they would stay in special shelters until the radiation is gone. Now, if all of this makes Switzerland seem like the safest place to live, just wait until I show you the final bunker on our list. Unlike the others on this list, the Sirius bunker wasn't built to protect Swiss citizens. It was built to protect their chocolate. You see, Switzerland produces over 170,000 tons of chocolate every year, and that's a lot of deliciousness that they don't want to lose. So, in the event of a nuclear war, this bunker will keep their precious cargo safe. And while 170,000 tons of chocolate does sound like a lot, it's actually not that much if you spread it among everyone in Switzerland. But hey, at least they won't run out of sugar. But speaking of running out, it's time for us to run out of Switzerland, because there isn't much else left to say here. Thank you for watching, and now I am gone. Nah, go hide in a bunker for the rest of the day.